So thank you guys for having me, PodMed Adventures. And Shalvi, heard you're a student, doing big things out there in the social media world. You and your team. But thanks for having me. It's gonna be very laid back, so you can interrupt me anytime if you have any questions that you think since it's not a live audience. Anything you think they would, have, you can always just interrupt throughout the slides. You don't have to wait to the end.
Okay, perfect.
It'll be more like a conversation, and I'm just kind of go over it. So even any ideas that pop up, you can always interject.
Okay.
Introduce myself. My name's I'm Dr. Altanar Johnson. I'm a 5th year PGY. Just couldn't get enough training. Decided to do a 2-year fellowship. So I'm a fellow of clinical medicine at Penn Medicine at University of Pennsylvania out here in Philadelphia. I actually live in New Jersey, so filming in New Jersey though. So this particular lecture, is going to be titled "Understanding, Identifying, and Addressing Microaggressions," and we kind of talked about it off, before we started recording, but it's geared towards more, healthcare providers, healthcare professions in general for this particular lecture. But microaggressions does exist outside of just medicine. But I kind of geared this lecture towards that. Disclaimer is, my advice, opinions do not represent Penn Medicine, the Penn Medicine GME, University of Pennsylvania Hospital System, ACFAS, CPME, which are my accrediting bodies. And so this is just a presentation I'm doing on my own to inform everybody. Just to kind of give a big, brief background information on me, so people who are not familiar with me. Basically, I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, raised in Houston, Texas. Did a lot of my schooling out in Houston. Did undergraduate actually at Barry University, which has a podiatry school. But after I completed undergraduate studies, I took a year off, worked at an HIV clinic, multi-specialty clinic, where I got more exposure to podiatric medicine. Decided to go into podiatric medicine, decided to go to school at Kent State University out in Cleveland, Ohio. Get a little 4 seasons action, a little different change of scenery, and get a little just a different perspective on medicine in the region. So I decided to go to Cleveland instead of Miami, but ended up going back to Miami again. You can if you have any questions, you can interrupt too.
Yeah. So you decided to go from Barry to Kent because of the seasons, and you wanted to kind of see how.
Yeah, I just wanted a different perspective because I knew that luckily I've been blessed enough to do, positions like this where I get to talk to you guys and other, on larger platforms as well, nationwide, even international. So yeah. I wanted, something that was going to give me a different perspective than just a guy who, did his undergraduate in Miami, did his medical school in Miami, did his residency in Miami. As you can see, I ended up going back to Miami for residency because I love it. I love it there. It's a great place. Yeah. So I went back, and I have family there, friends there, and so we went there, and I went back there for residency, which was great training, and then I ended up deciding I really, like we kind of talked off camera as well with diabetic medicine, wounds and research and all of that. So I got into that and realized, I want to get further training in it. So I did it, signed up for a 2-year fellowship. It's not too many 2-year fellowships. I think there's about 3 of them, maybe 4. There's a surgical one that's 2 years as well. Heavy surgical nerve fellowship, I don't know why that's 2 years. But most of the clinical research ones are 2 years. Since you could also let the audience know. So yeah, there's one that's in Michigan, which is, has a clinical research one, and mine, and then the one in Georgetown, which is in DC. Then there's another one in Dallas. That one's, I think you can choose between a 1 and 2. At ours, you can choose a 1 and 2, but they kind of encourage 2. That's up here. I know that. If you have any questions, you can let me know.
And what are each of those about? Are they all wound care related? You said one of them is nerve.
Yeah, so when it came to, we talked about 2-year ones that were 2-year fellowships. Yeah, all of those that I mentioned were clinical research ones, except the one in Atlanta is a 2-year surgical fellowship that's geared towards lower extremity nerve surgery.
Okay.
And they kind of focus. The reason why I think it's great that it's 2 years because they're trying to, it's tough stuff doing nerve surgery. I, have some training in it and undergrad and residency.
Yeah.
So I do some, I know some nerve procedures, and we actually do some here, but they kind of focus, solely on that. That's what that particular fellowship is on, and it takes a while to get that acuity up on nerve because it's tough, tough stuff. So
and is that for like neuropathy? Like you would do surgery on people who have neuropathy? Okay.
Yeah, they do it for neuropathy patients with they call it two-hit syndrome. I don't know if you've probably heard of that yet. You probably haven't gotten too much into it.
Yeah, what is that?
It's a double hit. I think if you Google it, maybe call it double hit or two-hit syndrome, but we call it double or two-hit in the clinical settings. But basically, it's let's say it's a patient that already has a neuropathy, whether it's diabetic neuropathy, idiopathic neuropathy, electropathy, and then maybe they'll get into a car accident, or they either have like some crazy major trauma, and then they get a double hit. So now they already had nerve problems, and then they get another hit with it, and they get this crazy, chronic pain stuff where basically the only, solution is amputation. But these guys are trained in, how addressing it. I'm somewhat trained in it because, luckily my director knows how to do some of that stuff because he did it back. He trained at the cab, so back in, Podiatry Institute, which is a lot of you guys got over there in Cali, a lot of those graduates too. So he knows how to do some of that stuff. But even then, some of the stuff that that was kind of overwhelming for the patient and for him, you send it out to specialists that do that, and that's what that particular fellowship is. Even though we know there's a ton of other fellowships, I can probably do a talk for you guys.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say, I was like,
yeah, I probably should do that. I can do that next time. Yeah, I can just give you a talk on that. I have one set up where I talk about the financial aspects I took into account and all of that. And is it worth it? Because most people want to know if you're gonna do it, it's gonna get more money, things like that. And we'll try to understand, and this it's kind of what we're supposed to do. Exactly. That's in regards to that. But so that answers your question. Yeah. So those other ones I mentioned, the Georgetown one at University of Pennsylvania where I'm at, the one at University of Texas Southwestern, and the one at University of Michigan are all clinical research, and they integrate. Some of them do a little more surgery than others. Probably most of them probably do more surgery than mine. I think Georgetown does about the same, like not too much. Because with researchers spend a lot of time researching, which is why.
Topic? Do they have a specific focus depending on where you go, or do you go in being like, this is what I want to focus my clinical research on? Which is
so that's a good question. I like that. Yeah, you're good interviewer. Oh, that's good. That means you've been doing this. No, so yes. So depending on where you go, like I think I don't want to like talk for those programs, but yes, there are programs that are geared towards just diabetic limb salvage, and that's what their grant money is, and that's how they kind of conduct their research. For us, because I can't speak on specifics just because I don't represent their program, but for us, we kind of embrace all of research. So whether like right now I'm running a study on limb salvage, which we're doing limb amputation studies, and we're also doing an elective surgery study that I'm doing. We're also doing, what else am I doing? I'm trying to do. I got about 4.
You did like stuff with onychomycosis too, right? Like
onychomycosis. Yeah, okay. So we're doing that one too. That's that's our biggest one because of the funding, and we're doing onychomycosis. Yeah, I kind of talked about that in the last interview. And so I do a variety of things, even though.
That's cool. I like that.
My particular interest is diabetic limb salvage, but I like to do everything because first I do what the grant money allows us. And then I kind of do things that I pick up that is more interesting. But I don't mind just doing diabetic. Personally, I don't mind just doing diabetic limb salvage research, but others kind of can do whatever. Because we take 2 fellows a year, and the 2 fellows that are coming in are pretty geared into limb salvage, but I got other projects that I'm working on that they're going to take over.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
They're kind of
we definitely have to have another. We have to do one, and we have to figure out how to do this so we can have more.
Yeah, maybe we should do it more often. You guys should probably take as much knowledge as you can out of me for real, because I'm not trying to like blow it up, but I'm just saying some of the stuff that I know help a lot of the students that some people just don't want to talk about it, or they don't how to see
and then the hard part is you don't even know what questions to ask, and then as you start getting more knowledge, you get even more questions.
Because even then, I remember when I was a student, I'm like, a fellowship, like I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna need it. I'm gonna be the greatest guy. I don't need all of that. I'm doing 3 years of training. I'm gonna be the best surgeon and all of that. But you start to get little things that you're interested in that you haven't spent time on and dove in, because it's 3 years. Even though you're on call a lot and there a lot, you're not getting everything you need, which is why, technically that's why they call this, doctors in training when you're residency. But then even then they call it private practice. It's called practice. You're trying to become an expert, but you're not really an expert. I think really usually like if you go based on knowledge and reading on how people become experts, usually it takes about 10 to 15 years to kind of be an expert on something. And we're only a couple of years in, which is not, not bad, but it's just kind of how it goes. Which is why I think the boards certify us as 7 years instead of certifying us right after. Yeah, for the surgical, for surgical boards, you just get it right after most times. But that's kind of goes into that. So I end up going to doing fellowship, which I am now. So now I'm in my last year, and so I'm with Dr. Scott Millay, who's actually the editor of the Journal of Foot and Ankle Surgery. So I kind of hit on ACFAS and JFAS. So I got a lot of that stuff going on. So that's what you had asked about Lim Savage. He does everything because he's the editor for the journal. So he does every type of research: elective, limb salvage, nerve, onychomycosis. The onychomycosis was going before it. So the onychomycosis, to go back to that study actually was started, is being conducted by who is now my faculty attending. Yeah. But she was a fellow that was ahead of me. So that was her study. Wow. She did everything. Now she's hired by the university. She works for the university. So she's a clinician, researcher, and actually a student there too. She's doing if you see Dr. Scott Millay names on that sign, has an MSc. He has a Master of Science in Clinical Epidemiology, which is a little bit more scientific than the MPH, which is another thing we can talk about. I told you I can teach you guys some stuff. But yeah, he does. Basically, he's
one talk a month or something.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, but basically, he has a master's in clinical research, clinical oriented research. Not that they're all basic science stuff, but this is what his specialty is, and this is what podiatry is trying to get more clinically oriented research projects done. Because I know you read stuff in class and you're like, okay, so where's the paper on it? And there's no paper on it. Somebody telling you something,
Yeah.
And, so that's what we try to execute, at least at our program, execute, some of that stuff that, we learned over the years and actually get some evidence behind it. I think you guys would be excited about a couple of studies that we have coming out, at least of our program, that you'll see in a couple of months from my co-fellow. I don't think any of mine will hit press in probably about a year or two, but his are coming out within the next year. And,
yeah, we'll be on the lookout.
It'd be great. Yeah, so that's the stuff that I do. I mean, I love my surgeries and all of that, but this is just kind of my passion, so that's how I pursued it. A lot of people, but there's other, like I said, we can talk about the surgical fellowships that's out there for podiatry.
Yeah.
I want to say there's about 40. I got to look at my slides, but I had looked all that data up back in the day. I want to say it's about 40 of them that are accredited. There's about 10 to 15 that's unaccredited.
Okay.
We'll talk about all of that in the future about what's the difference between accredited versus unaccredited. Mine is accredited, double accredited actually by ACFAS and CPA. But we can go into that a whole nother day. I told you we could do this. But for this particular lecture, like I said, microaggressions, it's a little bit more of a serious topic, but like I said, we'll try to keep it laid back. And if you have any questions, interject me anytime so the audience can get a feel for what this topic is about. But this lecture is geared towards, informing the audience and understanding and identifying and addressing microaggressions and microaggression subtypes, micro-invalidations, micro-assaults, and micro-insults. So like I was saying also on the camera, even recently, before recording this just last week, Dr. Jill Biden, who's the incoming First Lady, was basically, insulted. That's microaggression, in micro-insults towards, the fact that she wanted to be addressed as Dr. Jill Biden. And, it seems like something that's not that important, but even you as a female student doctor, you probably can resonate with that. Like, if it was a guy, if it was a guy asking for that same type of, recognition when she doesn't just want to be, Madam Biden, she wants to be Dr. Jill Biden. And that's a microaggression. It's not like they're really being discriminatory. It's just something that
it's like a subtle.
So that's exactly subtle, but it adds up because we also, I would send a link to another YouTube video that you could probably post. I don't know if we can play it because I don't know all the copyright and all of this. But there's a YouTube video.
I mean, I can link it.
Exactly, we can link it. Yeah, but I'll describe it to you guys. So just try to get like a setting of microaggressions and why we've been addressing this in this recording. So basically, in the YouTube video, they had like this giant mosquito that would go around saying little microaggressions and it kind of like bite at the person. But it's true. So it's like the first time you do it, it doesn't really do anything. Second time it doesn't. Like you said, so even when it goes back, you just using Joe Biden because she's the most relevant, one that we all can identify. So maybe they think she's been making a big deal of it, but we don't know how, when did she even complete that degree? So maybe she's been going through this for decades or years, or whenever she actually acquired it, to get people to recognize her as that. So it's, it's not, it's very subtle things, but it's not, things that shouldn't be happening, especially from, as us for healthcare providers. But so what is microaggression? So it's a term first coined by a psychiatrist, Chester Pierce, in 1970s. He was an African American gentleman. A couple of his works, were expanded on with these other psychiatrists out in the field, Dr. Devilo and Dr. Gardner, out of University of Delaware and Yale. And they kind of expanded on it. At first it was geared mostly towards just like racial microaggressions, but then as you can see, these other two authors, they kind of expanded it, towards gender and sex, sexual identity and ethnic backgrounds and religion, which is kind of true because all of those, marginalized groups get discriminated towards, and microaggressions, so just, to me, it's almost like a sensitivity thing, but it's a little bit more subtle than sensitivity, because even sensitivity stuff is, a little bit more, identifiable, gross, or, the macroaggressions. But these microaggressions are little subtle things that occur. So microaggressions, focus primarily on describing the dynamic interplay between the perpetrator and the recipient, classifying everyday manifestations, deconstructing hidden messages. So hidden messages too is another one, and exploring the internal psychology and external disparities in education, employment, and healthcare consequences. So that's kind of, that definition, that came from Dr. Sue. It was her paper that she published on microaggressions, pretty much verbatim, which is fine, but I give it credit. And so that's the thing. And the thing about microaggression too, it kind of, unlike a lot of, psychology studies, there's, I would say unlike, but like most theories, this one actually kind of focuses on how the person feels when that microaggression occurs. So it's not about just the action, but it's like the reception of it. So it's sort of like that same thing with the animation with the mosquito bite, given this YouTube video plug. But basically it's like when that bite, occurs, how does that person feel, after that happens? It's not about the biter necessarily, because a lot of this, blatant racism and all of that, xenophobia, it's all kind of like, how does that person treat another person? But it's like, how does this person receive that? What's happening to them?
It's more about like the consequence of the action rather than the action.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a little different. A lot of people think because I remember good thing that I have an open forum with you. So like even I posted on one of my social media pages about microaggression. And one person's like, I know all about it. This is just being nice. And I'm like, it's a little bit more than being nice, because even I myself, have committed microaggressions. We can get into that. And I'm a Black male, it's not necessarily about being nice. It's kind of more being aware of
being aware. Yeah, I feel like it's
not
just
you could be a nice guy. Like I'm most people in general would think I'm a nice guy. You're like, oh, you created a microaggression, but it's because I wasn't aware, which is a little bit different. So there's, like I said, one of the other types of microaggressions are racial microaggressions that more comparable to adverse racism than generally occurring below the level of awareness of the well-intended people. So, like you said, it's subtle. And then microaggressions are brief and come in workplace, daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities. And whether intentional or unintentional, they can communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial insults towards people of color. And that's everybody. So the different types of microaggressions: micro-invalidations, micro-assaults, and micro-insults. So you have micro-invalidations is a communication of, that is subtly exclude and negate and notify the thoughts or feeling of it, of that person of color. So for example, I put here, from Dr. Sue's paper, for instance, people that, often ask Latinos where they're born or convey the message that, they're a perpetrator foreigner in their own land. So basically it's like, or even like, you and I are both, both people with melanin in our skin, they'll be like, oh, where you guys from? You're like, I'm like,
I feel like I have to all the time. They're like, because I'm from Fiji, but I get all the time. So where are you from? India? Like, you're from India, right? Like,
Yeah,
no,
see,
no, no, I'm from Fiji. And they're
yeah,
like,
it's not like they're trying to be offensive, and it's
yeah,
even like I said, I've done similar things like that, but it's
yeah.
more being more cognizant and
And then just being
certain
aware, like it's fine, it's okay, it's just like
exactly, and it depends on what region you're in. I think probably in Cali, being they consider foreign a little bit more open, so people you can ask that without being offended. But if you're in the Midwest and you're someone like color, they don't really like being asked that. You're probably used to it because you're on the Cali, and when I was in Florida, people do there's a lot of melting going on. But even like on the East Coast, Midwest, they're kind of not as open.
It depends.
Yo, I'm American too. Like,
I mean, I didn't even realize. I came to California kind of towards like the tail end. I've been here the longest, but I was in Wichita, Kansas for.
Oh, see, yeah.
Oh yeah, Wichita, Kansas. But I mean, I didn't know any better. I was pretty young. I think I was there for like 3 or 4 years, and then I moved to upstate New York. Now that it was me, one person who was Asian, one person from Puerto Rico, and it was just the 3 of us, and you didn't know any better. I didn't know any better until I came to California, and I was like, this is what diversity means. Like,
exactly why it's very important, and that's like the theme of this particular and I wouldn't call it a lecture, we'll just call it a talk. But that's the theme of the talk, is just the importance of diversity and getting those different experiences. It doesn't make the person racist or xenophobic. It's just they're not aware of it. But that's why we have this. So people, even if we can teach one person, about it, it's even better. But so micro assaults, is the conscious, intentional derogatory action. So basically, it's like I said, displaying white supremacist signs or Confederate flag. I said regional for this particular because, like I said, in the South, which is where I was from, Confederate flag does represent, that oppression. I know they, I live up north now, and there's some Confederate flags. I don't think those people necessarily try to do it to be oppressive. I think it's more like that's their background, that's their great grandfather was in the war, Civil War and everything. So they're kind of just proud of it. Yeah. And even though in the South, that's some of the cases, but we know that, that's what the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK kind of use that flag to kind of represent oppression. So that's why I said regional. So not all people who display Confederate flags are trying to be blatant racist, but you just gotta those goes back to being sensitive and aware as well. That's what it means. Micro assaults is kind of basically blatant racism essentially, but they call it micro assault because you're trying to intentionally cause harm to that person. And then another example is preventing one's son or daughter from dating outside of the race and ethnic group, and which is fairly common, amongst all races. So it's not like, which is also basically a micro assault. And micro insults, consist of verbal, nonverbal, environmental communications that subtly convey rudeness and insensitivity that demeans a person's racial heritage or identity. So, for example, for this one, I put an employee that asks a coworker of color how he or she got the job, almost implying like, an affirmative action or quota system. So we kind of hit on what we just mentioned earlier, where just lack of diversity for that, particular person that probably mentioned that, because they're thinking like, oh, did you, get this this job because they're a person of color or something like that. But it's, obviously that's not the situation. And, those type of perpetrators have to be aware of that as well. So who experiences, like we kind of hit on that as well, who experiences microaggressions? Any marginalized group can be subject to microaggressions: racial, religion, gender, sexuality, and disability. I kind of mentioned, like I said, so when I said I committed microaggression, I remember I had a patient, I actually just wrote about this in an upcoming publication on microaggressions, but I'll tell you, kind of, the people get basically an insider info.
Love it.
It was. But basically it was, I had a patient, transgender patient. At the time it was a new patient, but she still identified by her, her sex assigned name, which is, basically a male's name. And I was like, so I didn't even look, I just looked at the male's name, walk in, start talking to her, and, it's like, how you doing, sir, and all this. And, she never actually, interjected me. And so after, the nurse pulled me aside. It's like, she identifies as this. And I'm like, you guys didn't tell me that in the chart. Like, obviously I try to play someone else. But it's like, it's things that, it seems like, like a funny thing or something. But I, even though that patient probably wasn't offended because they're like, I'll tell you, I actually spoke to her later about it. But so that was basically, I was committing those mosquito bites,
Yeah.
not that I was intentionally trying to do anything. So that's why when people say, intentionally it's about being kind. No, I was being nice. I was trying to be, address them by, sir, madam, or whatever. But that was not, her identified sex. And, she was in the middle of changing her name legally and throughout the system and the medical system and everything. And so it was just little things like that, that that adds up. So eventually I, set her aside and spoke to her about it, was more apologetic. Once I built the report, I apologized at that moment, just like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. And she was just like, oh, no problem, it happens all the time. I mean, she goes, my name's still this, but I'm still trying to legally pay for this, but with COVID and all of this, kind of hard to get. I understand that. So, and I just but I was like, I should have read the chart, because in the chart it says, we have sections, that tell you what to do, but I just kind of assumed, looked at her name, sent a new patient, you could try to get through the workday. But as healthcare providers, those are little things that could have been avoided, and that shouldn't have happened. But luckily, I got on the right good start.
Yeah, it's nice that you're able to establish that rapport and talk it out with her, and I'm sure she appreciated that.
Exactly. So we got it together. But like I said, I had spoke to her, after I kind of built a rapport with her. And she was just like, kind of, I'm like used to it. And, I was like, maybe it's, that's not something, should be used to, especially, as a medical provider. I wasn't like some guy at the, I don't know, like just that ran into her. I'm the person that's taking care of her.
Yeah.
I should have, taken that little extra time. So just like as providers, we need to be, aware of that when it comes to the racial, religion, gender, sexuality, and disabilities. I'm sure those individuals experience it a lot too.
Yeah.
Just from whether it's cognitive disability or a physical disability as well. So a lot of people just try to generalize it as just a racial thing, but it's not just a racial thing. It happens to everybody, and so that's just one of my particular things. But because some people want to say, oh, it's just people just said don't be racist, but it's not. Microaggressions is a very broad, very broad topic, and anybody can experience it. But like I said, so disenfranchised individuals often describe microaggressions as a pattern of being overlooked. So basically almost overlook the patient, underrepresented it, which is almost another situation too, because, there's not that many transgender patients out there just from population perspective, and then devalued. Luckily I didn't devalue, but you could have easily been done that too, which is not intentional, but because of their race, ethnic background, and religious belief, and also gender. Identifying microaggressions, making assumptions about religions of the Middle East, so faculty, coworkers in casual conversations, asking women or men of color about their grooming habits, giving business cards for a male masseuse to a single woman in the department. It seems like funny. It almost seems like something common sense, but it's another thing about being aware. What if that person really was thinking about, let's say it's a friend or something that owns that business, and they're just trying to give it out, realize the message that they're conveying to that to that person. This is because this is a workplace, got to be very professional, healthcare settings, things like that.
Yeah.
It's not just like friends. You may be friends with them, but in a work setting, kind of be a little bit more cognizant. Asking women or racial minorities about personal finances, purchase, and making specific judgments based on these, things like that. And repeatedly calling transgender faculty or patients by their birth assigned name prior to transitioning. And then also, it's a touch of Black woman's hair.
Yeah.
She's like, I go through that too, and I'm from Fiji.
It's a thing. No, if you have curly hair, people just like to touch it. It's like okay, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's just not appropriate,
Yeah.
Coming in on that nice accent. So I said regional, so we kind of talked about this too. In California, that could be more of a compliment, but like you said, if you're in the Midwest or the East Coast, it's probably, a little bit more offensive to those, to those people, the patients or the providers that have using that accent. But like I said, in California, Florida, they're kind of the outliers because they kind of embrace that difference in diversity.
Getting too spoiled here.
Yeah.
No, but I'm looking.
Where are you doing your externships?
I'm going out. Yeah, the goal is to go out. So yeah, I'm looking at across
like all over this country.
Yeah, because I'm not sure where I want to end up, but I definitely want to go see how it works in other parts.
Oh, you do. No, that's smart. So addressing microaggressions, we call them responding to microaggressions with micro-resistance, ally development, and micro-affirmation. So micro-resistance is basically advocates, essentially just, having, you can also be one of those people who experience, microaggressions, or you could be a person that doesn't experience them too often, to be an ally. So microaggressions are small-scale individuals or collaborative efforts that empower targeted people and allies to cope with, respond to, and challenge microaggressions with the goal of ultimately dismantling the system of oppression. So basically at our hospital, we actually have a group of doctors of color, or that they just not say color, but it's minorities in general. And we all kind of get together and talk about these things, which is great. And it's funded by the hospital. Because we're in the, we have like 5 hospitals, I think 6 if you include CHOP, which is a sister hospital of ours, which is Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, sorry. And so we have like 6 hospitals that we kind of collaborate and we talk about this stuff, and kind of just almost like therapy, but just kind of like, we have people that are chiefs of the department, chiefs of staff, that kind of explain it, and our people, even as, students that are a part of this organization, where y'all kind of get your voice heard. It seems like a kumbaya type thing, but it's very, very beneficial. It was even more beneficial before COVID, when you kind of all got together, see face to face, even though you get to do it now virtually.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to kind of see, someone, same background as you, from all walks of life, kind of talking about the experiences that they go through. And that's basically micro-resistance. It's like basically you guys talk about this, like, yo, I'm still going through this now. I remember there was a female, I don't know if it's too specific. There was a female provider that would kind of talk about like salary, trying to approach your, supervisor about salary increases as a female. So she was like, a lot of the male providers will automatically get it. Yeah, like, because they're just like, are they not, or like maybe the male provider is not even scared to just go and, say I need more money. As far as the female is kind of worried about, how is it going to appeal with the like, because if they have a family, they're going to think, oh, because you're asking for money, you're not trying to work as hard or something like, it's always like those, that's also microaggressions. So it was like, little things that I don't even think of myself, because I don't even experience this. You get to hear those experiences and those type of groups.
No, it sounds really good, because it makes it very real and it brings it to light, so it's kind of at the forefront of your thinking when you're out there. So
and if you look up the data for, especially you being a female provider, upcoming female provider, just look up like any stats on like for healthcare with women, and especially academics, because I'm in an academic setting, like in medicine itself, like the promotion. So let's say a California, I don't want to mention your school, but like let's say in a podiatry school, there's 60% female and 40% male. If you look at like those, so let's say it's supposed to be 60% female, 40% male. We're not talking about any color, like race didn't really take a factor into this. But if you look at the people that are in leadership, it's like 60% male and then 40% female. You see, like it's reverses. So it's like, wait, we're putting out more female doctors now, but our leadership roles are still, in control by males. And that's just doesn't make sense. Like, in the last 10 years, I think women have I think there's actually more women doctors than there are males. For sure, I know that, but I don't know how long, but that shift kind of happened 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So
now
why isn't why doesn't it show in the leadership? It's showing the leadership. And then they'll try to say, women only work part-time. That's a microaggression. Things like that. It's like little things that kind of like doesn't make sense. So,
and then like some of it is just like, it's part of life, right? Like if you want to have kids, like you're gonna have to plan around it, but that doesn't mean you have to put your whole life on it.
Yeah, you can. Exactly. So that's exactly why. But that's what, those people who make those promotions make those decisions, both males and females. Well, I'll say that to another female, which is not gay. And that's basically what it's talking about. So an ally, is someone committed themselves to ending misoppression and leads to targeted and act accordingly. So basically being advocates, making people aware. Basically you and I are basically being an ally, promoting this and getting people to understand that they don't have to be a part of this. They could be against this stuff. Micro affirmations are tiny acts of opening the door to opportunity, gestures of inclusion, caring, and graceful acts of listening. So micro affirmations is basically just, that's going to be more like being a nice person, but actually just being cognizant that it exists. Don't shut it down. Like like I said, like people on my social media were like, I know how to do this. I know how to be nice. But that's actually almost contributing to the problem, because it's not about being nice. I mean, you can be nice and still commit microaggressions, as I kind of alluded in my story earlier. I was being nice, but I was being, I was not being appropriate for that. Yeah, exactly. Which is, I'm sure the patient's like, oh, he was nice, but he was definitely, he didn't take my feelings into account. So what can targeted people do in the face of, potential microaggressions? Remind yourself, about what you value, practice self-care, thinking about the bigger fish you have to fry. So basically thinking about the bigger picture, putting interactions into a broader, context of your life goals, and practicing gratitude. So basically, it's just kind of, this is the stuff that, the people that experience constant microaggressions can do to try to cope with it. But basically, got to put that, remind yourself that, you're valued, and that this is kind of a system that existed, and hopefully we can, break it down that existed before you got into it, especially in medicine as, people of color, female, gender, and also, those who are identified lesbian, gay community, because they're all going to experience it, because just the way the system was before any of us got into it. What can allies do to help the colleagues facing microaggressions, becoming more informed and empathetic, talking and developing authentic relationships with your colleagues? I think this is a big deal, because if you actually understand, if the person actually knew you and, got to know you instead of just judging you based on, your hair or something like that, they would kind of understand how to approach you. So maybe then it won't be as offensive to make you like that. They're, curious about the curls in their hair, things like that. And raising awareness of the macro and microaggressions, which is what we're doing today. This is more like so for administration. Like I said, having groups and mentorship that's appropriate to help, identify these avenues and making it more, basically open. This is just for the people that are in charge that can change and give authentic micro affirmations to another one and advocate behind closed doors. So basically, also that doctor who I was mentioning that was kind of telling me about being a female doctor asking for a pay raise. So when she got in charge, she was like, whenever they hired a female doctor, there was a set salary that she wanted them to have in their department, or else she wouldn't. She said, don't even offer it to them. So things like that. Instead of just, worry about her getting her slice of the pie, she wanted to make sure, even if, it was a person she probably doesn't really know personally, she wanted to make sure they got this fair offering from the.
I think that's another important thing that you bring up. Just if it's something that you're facing or something that you've seen or gone through, it's important that once you're in a position of power that you kind of pay it forward and help out others so that they don't go through what you did, and it's just never ending. Exactly.
That's why, I don't mind telling the story about the, misidentifying sex of my patient. It seemed like a smooth, funny thing, but even like I said, the patient probably wasn't that offended. But what if that was her 4th or 5th doctor visit where that happened? And she kind of dude, the doctors don't even care about me, things like that. So you gotta think about those bigger pictures. But
there was in my undergrad, we had student-run clinics, and there was one that had a subset that was a gender transition clinic, and it's all student-run. It was all free, but so many of their patients, they were always booked. It was always busy, and it was because so many of those individuals didn't have trust in the healthcare system anymore. Because they weren't being treated fairly. And this is in, California, that's also supposed to be more progressive and more inclusive and more open. So, yeah, it's an issue. So.
Yeah, you broke up a little bit. Say it again, I'm sorry.
Oh, I said that they had a hard time, hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So at the gender clinic, they were always booked and they were always busy. And a lot of it was because those individuals couldn't identify with the healthcare system anymore. They didn't feel like they were being heard. They didn't feel like they were being listened to. And so they would go to this free clinic that was, pretty low and limited on their resources, but at least they were being heard and they felt valued. And this is all in California too, right? So
right. Where it's supposed to be, very open. Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done, but this is part of it. So thank you for
exactly.
doing.
So that, that was basically my last slide. It says, establish community norms, ground rules, use preferred gender names, personal pronouns, what the individual identifies with, and it's a group hug from the questions. And this is my contact information here. References there.
All right.
Let me stop the
Awesome.
share. Yeah, if you have any particular, questions that you had noticed throughout the talk, let me know. But that's pretty much, kind of hit on most of it. Because I think a lot of people think when they hear, oh, someone's going to talk about microaggressions, that somebody's going to chastise them for, the actions that they've committed, or, but it's not necessarily that. Like I said, it's understanding how to understand that individual, whether, based
What
on
they're going to perceive it as.
Exactly, because a lot of people, especially you'll, like I said, you'll have a first-hand experience on it when it comes to just interviewing for, residencies that are, super intense, and they're like, oh, will you be able to do this, or, things like that, and it's like, why are you even asking me that? But it's
Yeah.
I mean, I don't take, too much into that, but it's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
Especially in healthcare, where, it used to be just a male-dominated field from all aspects.
Yeah, and now we're slowly kind of progressing, and that change, like you said, has happened. There are definitely more female doctors, but we need to, still.
You gotta advocate. You guys gotta, advocate for each other. It's just physicians of color need to advocate for each other, no matter what background they are. Just kind of how it goes. Like, it'll be great.
Awesome. This was a really good talk, and we need to figure out some other dates and put on.
Yeah, we could do the fellowship talk. We could do whatever Q&As, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah. And do you prefer this? Because we could also do like a go live and do it on a Sunday, and then that way we can have more.
Yeah, whichever you want to do. We can do go live. Yeah. Whichever you guys think will get the message out. I'm game for it. Because like I said, as long as we can get I'm happy if we get 1 or 2 people that understand something. 100 better, thousands better. But hey, as long as we can help somebody not make the same mistakes that I made throughout my training. But I mean, obviously, everyone's gonna make mistakes, but just
I learned a lot from today's. I mean, I feel like I've gone through some of those, but yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot, and I think this is part of the reason why putting it on YouTube is going to be good, because then people can access it, as often or whatever. So.
Exactly. Like I said, I'm not coming from like a pedestal. Like, you guys do this. Like I just told you guys, I do it. I probably will do it again. Doesn't mean that it's right or wrong, but it's just kind of how it goes. But you have to minimize as much as you can. You never know, man. Our patients are very fragile, especially the ones that we deal with. You kind of mentioned diabetic. I mean, even that's technically a disability. Those patients with those chronic wounds, and you ask them about, I don't know. You could even say, like, oh, why don't you exercise? But it's like, how am I exercise if I have this chronic wound?
Yeah,
that's a micro.
Especially if they have like Charcot. We're like, make sure you don't walk on that, but you want me to go exercise? Like,
that's exactly. It's like
exercise. Totally didn't think about that. Like,
it's a little, like I said, it overlaps with sensitivity, but it's more than just being a nice person. I mean, being a nice person goes a long way, but being an educated person goes a little bit longer.
I like that quote. That's it. You gotta quote that.
So we'll see. But this is great. Like I said, we'll do it another time.
Okay. All right.
Reach me.
Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but thank you again for meeting on a Saturday morning or afternoon for you.
Yeah, that's true. 3-hour difference. All right, have a good one. Take care.
Bye.